17 Cram, Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, Flashcard Set 8.3, Film Adaptation of Chinese Literature. All right, so as you read the passage, you'll notice a few highlighted selections of text. What I want you to do is garner meaning from these specific selections in order to answer the Foundations of Comprehension question that follows the passage. This question will require you to demonstrate that you know how to interpret word choices made by the author, okay? All right, so good luck and happy reading. Paragraph 1. The studies of adaptation tend to privilege literature over film, but not the other way around, and assume that a film adaptation has certain responsibility to remain faithful to the spirit of the text upon which it is based. The main purpose of Hsu Huang Detman's book, adapted for the screen, The Cultural Politics of Modern Chinese Fiction and Film, I would argue, is to provide some alternative thoughts besides. This assumption of how film and fiction should be viewed in adaptation studies. Detman is interested in how filmmakers have gone about the business and art of transposition from one medium to another. This transposition and the processes involved in it, in turn, enrich our understanding of the interconnectedness of the cultural context of texts and artists in Chinese films and fictions. In other words, Detman does not simply deal with the issue of what can be transferred in moving from fiction to film, namely narrative, and what cannot be. More importantly, she investigates the distinct ideological goals of writer and filmmaker that contribute to the differences between texts and films. Paragraph 2. Detman looks at the connections between film and fiction in the context of various Chinese communities on the one hand and contemplates their differences on the other hand. For example, one case study that Detman uses to illustrate gender politics is the adaptation of Su Tong's novel Wives and Concubines into Zhang Yimou's film Raise the Red Lantern. Detman argues that Zhang draws from the strengths of Su's plots and reconfigures the story's narrative codes, notably transforming a key symbolic site in the novel. A defunct meaning no longer functioning, definitions are not a part of the original text. Well in a back garden, into a rooftop death chamber. As a result, Zhang's new metaphor illustrates the important directional option of changing the staging of the story to maximize the cinematic effect. The well in the novella, a novella is a short novel or a long story, and the compound roof in the film not only map out key theoretical differences between the two texts, but the distinct approaches to the exploitation of women also reflect profoundly different conceptions of the relationship between art and society. These two metaphorical spaces, Detman suggests, not only juxtapose meaning place or deal close together for contrasting effect, the fluidity of feminine ambivalence, ambivalence meaning the state of having mixed feelings or contradictory ideas about something or someone, with the solidity of the patriarch's iron rule, but also open up very distinct imaginary space for the reader and the viewer. Paragraph 3. Many scholars argue that the one thing that literature and film have in common is narrative. By narrative, I mean a series of events. sequentially connected by virtue of their involving a continuing set of characters. Detman questions this assumption in her book. One example is the adaptation of Liu Yichang's novel Intersection into Wong Kar-wai's film In the Mood for Love. In Detman's analysis, Wang appears to radically distill Liu's novel into something other than three frames containing three separate quotations: the opening shot, an intertitle, and a concluding still. Instead of reconstructing the literary narrative, Wang creates a new storyline, thereby challenging the assumption shared by many adaptation scholars that narrative is the property that makes two media commensurable. Commensurable meaning measurable by the same standard. Liberating filmic adaptation from almost every question of fidelity. Wang's style pushes us to recognize that Detman calls that what that not that what just what Detman calls abstract adaptation, a style that creates a new theoretical dialogue about how film and literature can intersect to reproduce aesthetic resonances. Resonances here meaning a quality that makes something personally meaningful or important to someone. Detman refuses to privilege one reading or form over another and remains focused on the distinct ways in which they have been received. All right. Of what can be transferred in moving from fiction to film. Is it A, it builds up to the alternative view that the writer and filmmaker can have distinct goals? Is it B, it is part of an argument that most adaptation scholars are mistaken in their views? Is it C, it explains why Detman is not taken seriously as an academic in adaptation studies? Or is it D, it clarifies a misconception that many have about Detman's views on adaptation? All right, so definitely press pause if you need to, open up a second window, and view the reading of the passage in order to search for the textual support in selecting the correct answer choice. All right, I'll give you a moment to think. Okay. So the formatting of this question is definitely foundations of comprehension, and you're being asked to interpret word choices made by the author. Okay, so immediately following the sentence quoted in the question, the passage author writes, quote, Detman investigates the distinctive ideological goals of writer and filmmaker that contribute to the differences between text and films. Okay, so it's looking like answer choice A, which is obviously the answer, but I still want to explore the other, premises behind the incorrect answer choice. Okay, so immediately following, okay, answer choice A is answer choice B. So let's think about this. Well, the author never argues that Detman's perspective should be substituted for the views held by most academics. This is a very tempting answer choice, but it's incorrect, okay? So answer choice B is out. The author only argues that Detman's perspective expands the commonly narrow view that film adaptation should be true to the original text, okay? The author also never suggests that Detman is not taken seriously as an academic, so answer choice C is out, or that her work is misunderstood, so answer choice D is out as well. Only thing she argues is that her book presents a novel perspective on the issue of film adaptation, which is what answer choice A is saying, okay? So answer choice A is the correct answer choice. It builds up to the alternative view that writer and filmmaker can have distinct goals.